Hi, and welcome to this third session of 8, in which I explore with you performance management conversations and how to make the most out of these. My name is Rachel Smith, and I'm the head of learning at Entelechy, and I'm really excited because this for me is the most important of all of the sessions, because this is the one that people sometimes don't realize they need to do. Because when you become a leader of any kind, you think that means that you have to talk a lot. It means that you have to direct and instruct and give your wisdom. And actually, probably one of the most important qualities you can develop is your active listening skills, your ability to hear your people. And that's exactly what this session is about. But before we get to that, let's have a quick recap of where we are so far in this journey. So, in session one, we explored some of the complexities and difficulties of performance management conversations. And we explored how we should be able to take on advice about how to improve. And sometimes we find it really hard. Well, a lot of the time, in fact, a study said everyone hated performance review conversations. And that's because we have an inner child that's constantly yearning to be told that they're good enough, that they're loved, and that they're safe. And a performance management conversation, well, that's just a direct attack on that inner child. So we need to put things in place to support. Then we explored last session about how to celebrate that person right from the very start, mostly because of that inner child. And when you're celebrating someone, it has to be specific, it has to be genuine, and you have to expand in order to let them know that you've thought about the impact. In other words, it has to ring with authenticity. And by giving that celebration, you nurture some of that person's inner child. Now, today, we go to the next stage of the conversation. You've celebrated them, and then what? Well, the then what is the year been like for you? Always a difficult question, and one that tends to, get a bit of a stumble. But before we get to how to prompt that conversation, let's have a reflection. Let's have a moment where we think about what's the difference between listening and hearing. And so you can listen to actually hear and understand what the person is saying. And you can listen waiting for your turn to respond, which means you already have the idea in your head and you're just waiting for that person to shut up now. And not a word of what they're saying is impacting what you've said. So think for yourself about you and your experience of listening to people and whether you listen to hear or listen to respond. And then think about the impact of that making it clear that you have listened to hear. So 30 seconds to think about those concepts, listening to hear, listening to respond, and the impact of that person feeling seen because of you listening to hear. Thanks for that. Thanks for reflecting. Thanks for pondering those really difficult, difficult questions. And I'm guessing if you have thought about what it feels like when you are seen by someone, when you've said something, and then you hear one of your leaders reflect that back at you, and how validated that makes you feel, I'm sure you can understand why listening to hear what someone says is absolutely essential. Now, when you ask the person how's it going, what's your year been like? the common response will be, "It's fine. It was great. Oh, really good, thanks." And then they'll wait for you to take the lead. Now, taking the lead in this situation is insisting that they say more, not going, "Brill, now it's my time to speak. I've given them time to hear, to be heard." No, that's not the case. You're going to have to structure this in a way that coaches out those ideas of what their year has been like. So the first question is, how do you feel the year has gone? Common response, fine, great, thanks. But what about a follow-up question? Could you give me an example of your successes that you value? And you might even follow up on that. Why was that of such value for you? Why did that offer such great success for you, do you feel? And then, have there been any challenges? And this one you're probably going to have to really follow up. Could you be specific? Could you give me real examples of those challenges? Why was that so challenging for you? And then what would you like to continue doing next year? Is that question that says what has worked this year, and another way of asking them what's gone well, really. And then what are they going to carry on doing next year? And then another way of talking about challenges, because sometimes we need to ask these questions in multiple ways. What changes do you want to make next year? So that's accepting that some things might not have gone well, and they're going to make sure that those things don't happen next year. And here's the trick, and here's the difficult trick, because you will have prepared for this meeting and you will think you know. You have to listen believing you don't know the answer already. You don't know the answer already. You think you know the answer, and you think you know the right answer as well, but you only have your point of view on the situation. So listen believing you don't know their perspective, and get ready to respond to that. Now, any sort of listening like this is filtered through your perspective. So you're right, you do know them and you have an idea and you've built a picture. You've got a more potentially broader picture because you have an idea of what's coming from above and what's happening across the team. But still, you have to recognize sometimes your conscious biases, the things that you've already decided, but also those unconscious biases that you hold, and challenge them as it's happening so that they don't form a blocker to you hearing exactly what your colleague perceives the year has been like. It is your responsibility to give them a genuine opportunity to have their story heard. Now let's do another moment of reflection. Thinking about a colleague who you have strong opinions about, somebody who you have an emotional reaction to when their name is mentioned. We all have them. That they're usually either the biggest characters or the most talented or those that with the strongest opinions. You know who I mean. What would be their story of the year? So set aside your ideas of what their story is and think from completely from their perspective. What would be their story? How challenging would it be to set aside your biases when hearing that story? It's a tricky one because I'm asking you to imagine somebody else's story and then challenge your biases to that story. See how you go. 30 seconds. Stick some ideas down in the comments if you have any about how that felt for you and how difficult it was. It's a challenge, I grant you, but it's one that leaders have to face all of the time in order to do justice to their people. and to help your people feel like they have a voice. It's probably one of the most crucial skills of leadership. Now, here's the 3 things I would suggest when hearing this story. Act like you don't know anything. Really, because you don't, actually, just yet, because they haven't been given the chance to speak it to you. So that should be an easy thing to do. Act like you don't know. Be open to being surprised. So, in other words, push aside those biases, conscious or unconscious, and be open minded to being surprised. And to show that you're genuinely listening, ask follow up questions, because that shows that you are actually paying attention to what it is that they're saying to you, and that you're interested and that you're intrigued and you want to know more, because knowing more is going to make your job easier. Now, I'm not going to pretend that everything I've suggested to you here is super easy. It's not. It's probably one of the hardest parts of being a leader. Next time, it gets a little bit harder still, because then you have to navigate that gap between your story and their understanding of reality. So even after hearing them and listening to their version, you might still hold a different point of view, and that's okay. But how do you navigate the gap? Share some of your reflections below. If you want to know more about Entelechy, please feel free to visit our website. It's been lovely chatting to you again. Looking forward to session 4.